Arizona has a huge game coming up against Alabama tonight, and we're going to talk a lot of signing day. All of that and more on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. All right. Now, Arizona's playing Alabama. Now, getting back on track is a relative term here because obviously Arizona lost to Purdue last week, and I think a big frustration for a lot of people was that Arizona just didn't look like they were totally invested in that game. And like we talked about, from a turnover perspective, from a just not really from a defensive perspective, it just didn't look like the Wildcats took the Boilermakers seriously. Now, again, the Boilermakers are a very, very good team. There's no doubt about that. And you know what? If they beat Arizona a couple times, there's probably not going to be a lot of problems with that. But it's just the way and the manner in which Arizona lost. And I think that's really what surprised some people. And even in the past, when Arizona has had, stretches where they haven't played well, down the stretch, the Wildcats have been able to pick up the pace and come back and win games. And I think that people thought that was going to be the case against Purdue. And once Arizona cut the lead to 4, I think a lot of people thought, well, all right, here we go again. Arizona's right back where we want him. And then that did not happen. So there's certainly that. Now, Alabama is an interesting team to talk about because this is not nearly as talented a team as last year. And that you had Brandon Miller, who was probably the best player in college basketball. Also one of the probably the scummier people, but either way, very, very good at basketball. Our old friend Javon Quinterly as well. But it was a really, really good team. But you could kind of tell towards the end of the year that they were probably going to fall off because there was just so many distractions that were coming on with Brandon Miller. And honestly, I think a lot of that is karma, to be honest. I think, karma visits us all. And I think that happened with Alabama in that first round loss. This was a team that I think would just finally had just had enough of everything that occurred, and that's where we're at. Now, this year it's different. You don't have that superstar that you had last year, but again, they're incredibly athletic, Alabama. Trayvon Brazile is one of the longest, most athletic people in all of college basketball. And not only is he one of the most athletic, he's a difference maker. He's a player that caught my eye last year. He can play, and quite frankly, he's a really good player. But the problem with this year's Alabama team and why they're not nearly as good as last year's Alabama team is that they don't defend. And honestly, against Arizona, if you don't defend, you are going to have a lot of problems. And that's why I think that this is going to be a very difficult game for Alabama to win, mainly because if you don't defend against Arizona, I think you're going to have some problems. And I expect that to be the case for Alabama. I don't look for this to be an easy game for them by any means. And honestly, defense is not something that you can just pick up when the season comes or as the season goes on. I think you either have it. I think it's either instilled or it's not. And Nate Oates is a guy who has certainly emphasized defense. He's emphasized shot blocking. He's emphasized length and athleticism. Always, as a coach, I'm a big fan of Nate Oates. Not really a fan of how he handled last year, but that's neither here nor there. But Trayvon Brazile obviously is a very, very good player. But again, if you don't defend against Arizona, you're going to have some problems. A big part of this, too, is getting certain players for Arizona back on track. Now, we talked a ton about Keyshawn Johnson. We talked a lot about Caleb Love. We're going to continue to talk about them. But this was a rough game for some U of A players and guys that Arizona is going to need to be fully engaged throughout the season. And while not maybe play at an All-American level, certainly played at an All-Conference level. And the first player is Kylan Boswell. Boswell did not play well. Boswell did not play well against in this previous game against Purdue. And I think some people are a little concerned about what's going on exactly because he didn't really play. He faded down the stretch against Michigan State as well. You could say that he was playing good defense. That's fair. But a dude like that's also expected to score. And that didn't happen. And honestly, I think you could make the case that Tommy Lloyd messed up by putting Kylan Boswell back in the game when Jaden Bradley was cooking in the manner in which he was on the defensive end. But either way, you got to get Boswell back in the fold. You got to get Boswell playing well. And a big reason you got to get him playing well is because Arizona needs him. Again, you've got the two stars in Keyshawn Johnson and Caleb Love, but Kylan Boswell kind of needs to be that straw that stirs the drink, the proverbial overused cliche that I just used. But you all get the point. Boswell is a player that can play basketball. He's shown this year that he can make the mid-range shot. He's also got the little James Harden step back, which I think is an impressive little attribute to his game. But he's also kind of faded down the stretching games, and you can't have that if you're the U of A because a lot was expected. Now, going into the season, I think a lot of people expected that Boswell was going to go pro after this year. I don't necessarily ever see him being a in commodity high profile NBA prospect for a variety of reasons. Mainly, you don't see NBA players that really look like him. But some guys just are ready to leave college after 2 years, whether they're going to be in the NBA or not. I think with Raleigh Alkins was an example of that. And, there's been other guys as well. It didn't really matter to them if they were going to get into the NBA. They just wanted to declare. And from all accounts, that seems to be Kylan Boswell. Who knows? Maybe that changes, but that's certainly not anything that I've heard. But Boswell, either way, has to step that game up. And I think that he should be able to, because again, physically, he's more talented than I think he gets credit for. Pella Larson's another one. Now, Pella, we're going to give a little bit of a pass to. Obviously, my bad, Pella. But Pella Larson has been he's been a stalwart for the U of A this year. He obviously had a rough game against Purdue, and I think a big part of that rough game and what surprised a lot of people about his performance was it kind of brought you back to last year to a certain extent, in that you would have games with him where you kind of wondered what exactly is going on out here. What are you doing? Where he would turn the ball over, or they would just be totally unforced, odd turnovers where you're like, exactly is going on here, Pella. And that certainly reared its head against Purdue. He had 5 turnovers. It felt like it was 7, but like we talked about with Pella, when Pella turns the ball over, it's going back the other way, and it's going back fast for dunk generally. They're generally very inopportunistic turnovers. But Pella Larson needs to be able to get his back on track. I expect him to, though, because again, it didn't take him out of his game. He was still able to get to the hoop. He was still able to do a variety of different things. So again, Pella's another dude right there to keep an eye on. Now, FanDuel.com/lockedon. This is where you want to be, people. Again, we are in the best time of the season. The NFL is getting ready for the playoffs, gearing up for the playoffs. College football playoffs is here. College basketball, obviously in full swing, and the NBA is in full swing. What more do you want? And what makes it even more enjoyable than to bet on it at FanDuel.com/lockedon? Again, there's nothing more enjoyable than betting on a game where you got a little bit of skin in the game, a little bit of action. So check it out. FanDuel Sportsbook. You will thank me later. Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of the other players we'd like to see build on it. Jaden Bradley. I am growing more and more fond of Jaden Bradley on a game-by-game basis. Now, again, Bradley is never going to be a dynamic offensive player, but I think he can be a 10, 11 point per game player. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're 10 or 11 points, totally cool with that. Totally works for me. Because defensively, he is an absolute pest. Reminds me a little bit of Reggie Geary in that regard. Again, not gonna say that he's Reggie Geary, because Reggie Geary was the best defensive player in school history, but he's got a little bit of that to him. He's got a little bit of that innate quickness and understanding of where the player is going to go. And just kind of understands basketball to that extent. But he's got to he's just got to keep doing that. I think that Lloyd, like I said, I think Lloyd probably made a little bit of a mistake changing that one up and taking Jaden Bradley out. I'd like to see Jaden Bradley and KJ Lewis get on the court together and then cause some problems defensively. Both these dudes are good defensive players. And not only are they good defensive players, they're also able to shoot passing lanes, and if they get the ball, they're able to take it the other way really quick and score. That is something that you obviously like if you're an Arizona fan watching these two guys. But again, I'd like to see both of them continue to build on that. And then I'd like to see Mount Crevis get some action. Now, you could tell that Tommy Lloyd thought that this probably was a little bit too big game for Mount Crevis, and honestly, maybe it was, because again, Zach Edey's best big in the country. They've all been there. But I'd like to see Mount Crevis get some more minutes, because, again, as much as I like Oumar Ballo, leader of men, he is definitely limited. And what you have right now is always kind of what Oumar is going to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think Crevis has another level that he can get to. And especially at the end of games, Crevis is somebody, especially with free throws, that I'd like to see out there. So let's see. I'd like to see that. So Mount Crevis kind of get back on track to a certain degree. And then Keyshawn Johnson, KJ Lewis, keep doing Keyshawn Johnson and Caleb Love, keep doing what you're doing. They're both playing at an All-American level. And not only are they playing at All-American level, they look like they're having fun out there. These are the two alphas on the team. However far Arizona is going to go is how far they are going to go. And again, they've played very, very well. That's kind of what you're looking for, though. Again, Alabama doesn't play any defense. This is not a very good Alabama team. Speaking in that direction. And I expect Arizona to win this game. I expect Arizona to win this game by about 10 points, setting up a very interesting matchup with FAU on Saturday. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about the rankings. I don't quite get why anybody would have Houston above Arizona. And the main reason why is this. Houston has not played anybody. Arizona has played a gauntlet of a schedule, and they're obviously getting negative points for playing a tough schedule, because Houston's best win is Utah. And Houston also is looking like they might lose Arsenault for the season. So I don't really get that. It feels like Arizona's being penalized for playing a really good team, or playing a really good schedule. Well, Houston is getting kind of that special treatment. I don't really understand that. I don't like it. But either way, Purdue, obviously, I have no problem with them at 1. I do believe that they're going to be susceptible to going out early again for many of the same reasons they had last year. But there's no, you can't really argue with their schedule, or you can't really argue with their wins. They probably have locked up a 1 seed already in the Midwest, because their wins are absolutely fantastic. Again, I think the Big Ten stinks, but I can't really hate on Purdue getting a 1 seed. UConn, I think UConn is probably going to be that 1 seed out east. I think on a neutral court, UConn matches up better with Arizona than Purdue does, mainly because they're long, they're athletic, and they got a lot of dudes that can play. So I think those two teams. Then I think you're looking at Kansas in the South. Kansas to me is interesting, mainly because I think their starting 4 or 5 is about as good as there is in college basketball. But then after that, there is a real drop off. They're going to have to stay healthy, and they can't get into foul trouble. And then I think Arizona is going to be that 1 seed out west, because I think Arizona is only going to lose about 3 games this year. So I'm not overly concerned about the Purdue game, but you would like to see Arizona get back on track and at least show the effort that I think a lot of fans were a little disappointed in, that it felt like it was lacking. Because again, this is a team that, while they're really, really good, this is not 88 or 89 UNLV where you're going to win every game by 99 points. So again, you got to be able to bring that effort. You bring that effort, you're going to be more than okay. As far as a prediction, I think Arizona is going to win this game 92-81. 92-81. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. Because like I said, Alabama, not a great defensive team, but I think Alabama is also going to be able to put the ball in the basket. And then as far as the FAU game goes, I think Arizona is going to win that game, but I think it's going to be a little bit closer. Now, granted, obviously it's in Arizona. So, the Alabama game is too, but I think it's going to be something like a 87-81 game, but very nice matchups for both teams because Alabama, they bring the length and they bring the athleticism, and then FAU, you bring the really, really good guards. But again, these are going to be your last two tests before conference play starts. And honestly, once conference play hits, Arizona's not going to get tested much unless Oregon gets healthy. USC has not been nearly as good as I think some people have thought. UCLA stinks. Colorado, the mountain schools aren't bad. They might be your biggest competition. So you want to get the best out of this that you possibly can. All right, now coming up, we are going to talk about the Arizona football signing day and what to expect. But first, LinkedIn. LinkedIn, my friends. All right. Like we talk about, everybody knows somebody that got a job through LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Whether you're looking for a job, whether you're trying to find a job, whether you are hiring somebody, check out LinkedIn. Again, you know somebody got a job from there, or you hired somebody. Either way, whichever part of the totem pole you're on, LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Post your job for free. LinkedIn Jobs. I don't have my LinkedIn as updated as I should, and that's my fault. It's probably why I am here. But check it out, LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. Now, signing day is here. Signing day is here. Now, the 2022 class, we've talked about it nauseum, is probably going to go down as the best recruiting class in school history because you got a first round pick in T-Mac. You got another first round pick in Jonah Sabanea. You've got a freshman All-American in Noah Fafita. And then obviously you got your Jonah Colemans, you got your Ephesians Price-Ox, your Tacario Davis. Basically, Arizona hit on about everybody in that class. Jacob Manu is going to be an All-American. Russell Davis, Isaiah Ward, can keep going on and on down the list. And honestly, you can go down the list. Wendell Moy. But so again, I don't expect any recruiting class to be quite like that, but I think we're also at the stage too, where you know that you can trust this Arizona coaching staff's evaluation skills, because again, a lot of the guys we talked about were not highly rated. Tacario Davis, kind of a low 3-star. Wendell Moy, 2-star. Jacob Manu, low 3-star. Jonah Sabanea, 3-star. So this coaching staff certainly knows what it's looking for. And it's looking for size and it's looking for athleticism. So let's talk about or speed. So Damon Williams is going to be Damon Williams, obviously the frontliner quarterback, top quarterback in the state, little undersized, but a big arm and can run around. It's going to take him a year or two to get ready, but I do believe that he will be that quarterback once Noah Fafita leaves. He has got a world of ability, but I just think that he needs a little bit of time to redshirt and just then he'll have a couple years. Then Jordan Washington, another guy, smaller dude, not the but incredibly fast. Got a little bit of Speedy Luke to him. I'd like to see him redshirt though, because I think that Speedy is going to have a breakout year. Take that for what it's worth. But those two guys obviously very, very highly rated. Then it becomes interesting. Do you get Aaron Butler? Aaron Butler would be the highest rated player in the entire class. 6'4", a 6'3" wide receiver out of Calabasas. Super, super fast. Looks the part. Got a few issues, but Arizona, I think, would certainly sign off and love to have him. You also possibly might get Gresham, kid out of Oregon, top 200 player in the country at receiver, and then I think you can call receiver a day. But the other players that I think you want to keep an eye on, though, but first and foremost are those dudes right there. Those are kind of your frontliners. Now, does Arizona get anybody late? That'll be interesting. At the cornerback spot, you already know that you got Jordan Shaw coming in. kid out of Downey, California, Indiana cornerback. He's not going to beat out Jakario Davis. He's not going to beat out Ephesians Prysock, but he's also going to be in that. He's also going to be in that mix where you're probably going to be able to have a little bit of advantage. Now on Thursday, we're going to break down everything that happens and who exactly does commit. This could be kind of a nonchalant, not a big day, or this could be something where we're talking about another top 25 recruiting class. You don't really know, but like I said, with Jedd Fisch, he's got all the momentum in the world. Not only does he have all the momentum in the world, he is, you can see why kids would want to play for him. I mean, he's talked about how we have a system, we have a style that kids should want to play in, and that is something that I think is very, very intriguing, and it'll be interesting to see how he continues to recruit, because there is obviously they're very good at finding diamonds in the rough, but it's also fun to get the really highly rated kids. But again, big dudes like Chubba May already here. You can line him up probably next to Big Bill Norton. But again, we're going to have a lot of talk about that. But but today, obviously a huge day, because you got Alabama. Got Alabama tonight, late game, 9:30. And then obviously signing day throughout, which we will report in depth about. And then obviously Saturday, you got FAU. And then after that, we start getting ready for the Alamo Bowl, which is not that far away. Remember the Alamo Bowl, everybody. But again, like we always talk about, no better time to be an Arizona Wildcat fan. And honestly, signing day is fantastic. I think there's going to be a surprise or two. We'll find out exactly who they get, but just know that as long as Jedd Fisch is here, talent is not going to be an issue on this Arizona team, and he has certainly proven that so far. Jedd Fisch, a dude that gets it. But on that note, as always, thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. Bear down, back the A, and we will be back with you tomorrow.